Welcome to Siliconsciousness, the DSR Network podcast focusing on the artificial intelligence revolution, politics, and policy.
This podcast is underwritten in part by the U.S. Embassy of the United Arab Emirates. Its editorial content is completely independent, and the views expressed are exclusively those of participating experts. It is presented live, without editing. For further information about the UAE's efforts in the areas of artificial intelligence and technology, go to the website of the embassy at www.uae-embassy.org and search for UAE-US Tech Cooperation. We thank them for their support. We thank everybody who's supporting this podcast for their support, and we look forward to it developing and growing over time because the issue is so important. Hello and welcome to Siliconsciousness. I'm your host, David Rothkopf. This week, we're very fortunate to be joined by Daron Acemoglu. He's an economist and the Elizabeth and James Killian Professor of Economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Last year, he received the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, and he's widely recognized for his research on political economy, economic growth, inequality, and relevant to what we're talking about here, the impact of technology on labor markets and in other ways. Welcome, Daron.
Thank you, David. It's great to be with you.
Very, very pleased you could join us. You've been characterized by some people as being a bit of an AI skeptic. It seems to me you're more of an AI realist, trying to look at actual data. And so I'd like to start with a kind of question that's at a slight remove from some of the more substantive ones I'll get to in a second. But I once had a conversation with another colleague of yours from MIT, and I said, how many economists actually understand enough AI to make predictions about it? And he said, jokingly, that they could fit in a phone booth. And then he said maybe 8. And I was wondering whether the number has gone up. And so what do you think in general about economic projections about something that's so few people really fully understand?
Well, look, I think everybody's excited about AI. So are economists. And 5 years ago, it would have been absolutely right that the number of economists who are very knowledgeable about AI and are willing to spend a significant amount of their time writing about it would have fit into some large phone booth. Now you would need a stadium. So there are a lot more people working on AI today than just 2 or 3 years ago. Now that people are working on different aspects of AI. Some people are using AI tools to do certain things, and some are looking at the effects of AI in social media. Some are looking at the labor market or macroeconomic effects of AI. And there is a diversity of opinions. One of the things that we have in U.S. society is general optimism about technologies. And I'm not a pessimist about technologies. As you rightly noted, I think we have benefited greatly from technological improvements when we have used them appropriately. And we couldn't imagine being where we are in terms of health, comfort, income per capita, if it hadn't been for scientific and technological breakthroughs. But I think some people in economics are over optimistic about AI. I probably am again in the more skeptical or realist camp within that group.
Yeah, well, let's talk about this a little bit. AI is often just talked about as if it were the latest technological innovation. It's the internet. But when you look at AI, it's a little bit more like the Industrial Revolution. It's very horizontal, and it takes many, many forms. And
Absolutely.
AI can be something that's like, an app, a chat, GPT kind of thing that helps you do research on a paper.
Right.
Or you can have AGI.
Yes.
You can have it affect supply chains. You can have it affect warfare. You can have it affect drug development. It seems to me that for that reason, it's very hard to sort of say, well, AI is going to have this effect on the economy. But yet people are regularly making projections. It'll have this GDP growth and this job effect. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, I mean, I think you're 100% right. AI is what economists would call a general purpose technology in many ways, actually. First of all, rather than say, a better drill, which will influence just a few industries and very few occupations, AI could affect all industries depending on how it's developed. There are many different types of AI. GPS arguably was an artificial intelligence tool at some point, and today we have especially important predictive AI and generative AI. But even more importantly, from my viewpoint, you can do many different things with AI. You can use AI in order to try to make workers more productive or automate work. You can use AI in order to monitor workers or for stifling surveillance, as we have seen in some countries, or you can use AI in order to create greater privacy. So there are many different things you can do with AI. So whenever you make some predictions about the future of AI, in addition to the usual uncertainty about any such forecasts, you have to be very specific about under what scenarios you're making those predictions and for what types of AI you're making those predictions. Right now, when people are making those predictions, essentially they're often focusing on generative AI or sometimes generative AI plus a few other things like computer vision and some types of additional predictive AI, such as AlphaFold or those things that are used in science. And they are making them either under, business as usual, current state of affairs, or they are making it under an optimistic scenario whereby AI will suddenly get much better. And some of them are making it under an mega optimistic scenario of like, we're going to come to AGI very soon. And then, of course, the productivity effects could be boundless.
Yeah. Now, let's look at some of the top line numbers that are associated with this. Obviously, the one that most people talk about is growth and how it impacts growth. And the range of projections on this is enormous. And you've come out regularly on kind of what seems to me to be sort of soundly evidence-based, fairly conservative predictions. How do you personally look at this range of projections?
Yeah, I mean, the range is really absolutely enormous. First of all, as I was hinting at the end of my previous answer, there are some people who are sort of already factoring in imminent super intelligent machines. And if you think that we're going to reach something like super intelligence within the next 2-3 years, of course you could get huge numbers. But even then, the details matter, I would say. Even with very, very capable AI, it's not like it's going to immediately be adopted in every job and in every task. That's a very slow process typically. Then there are more grounded numbers, such as those that come from Goldman Sachs or McKinsey, which are still very optimistic, like things that increase GDP per capita by 10% within the next 10 years or more. Now, before I give you my take, let me just put some context here. In economics, finding things that would move GDP per capita by 1% is very, very rare. So when people get to the bottom of big tax reforms or various different types of new opportunities, big export markets, etc., leading to 1% increase in GDP in an advanced economy such as the United States is very, very difficult. So in that light, 10% increase in GDP, is gigantic. Now, what I do is, yes, it's a little bit more on the conservative side. I say, let's look at the current AI capabilities and follow what would be like a regular expansion of these capabilities, but nothing revolutionary. So that's already one big assumption that I'm not in the same boat as people expecting AGI and superintelligence within 10 years. And then I look at various types of data and I say, what are the things that AI can do right now or will be able to do within the next 10 years? Again, a huge uncertainty on those things. But I think it's safe to say that unless there is like a huge breakthrough, AI is not going to be able to do any of the manual tasks that people in blue collar occupations do, construction workers do, custodial stuff do, because for that to be possible, first of all, you would need a big breakthrough in the spatial understanding of the artificial intelligence algorithms and models. But second, even more importantly, you need huge advances in flexible robotics that could then be integrated with AI, which don't seem to be on the horizon, not within the next several years. Then there are things like, what you're doing, prepare a podcast, or what I'm doing, teach and do research at a university, what CEOs do. That requires a lot of judgment or requires a lot of social interactions. Now, some people would say even those are on the cutting block, but I think I take the more conservative view and say those are not possible either. So what's left are essentially cognitive white-collar tasks that are done in offices without major real-world interaction. And that's not a trivial fraction of the economy. That's about 20% of the economy that could be ultimately doable by the current capabilities of AI. But even then, things that are ultimately doable are not always profitable to do. We realize that with robotics, there were many things that robotics could do, but when people started doing them, it turned out to be very expensive. So, and things spread slowly. So on the basis of other estimates on how things fast are proceeding in vision technologies, I say about a quarter of those are going to be doable. So that leaves you about 5% of the US economy that's going to be augmented or more likely automated by AI, and you're going to have some cost savings. And then I estimate what those cost savings could be. Putting those two things together, I end up with a number like around 1% of GDP growth within 10 years, which is great. I'll take it. I think any policymaker would take it, but it's not revolutionary yet.
Yeah, and I think one of the things in what I've read that you've said and done is you leave open the possibility that technological changes could change the estimates as we go forward. Now, another area where we often, hear weighty economic prognostications about AI is related to what you were just saying, and that is labor market implications. And, you get people saying, well, this could eliminate 20 to 30% of jobs or 20 to 30% of white collar jobs. And there'll be no more radiologists and there'll be no more, young lawyers because AI can do all of that. And this is going to be extremely disruptive.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who'll go, every technological revolution creates new jobs. I'm not sure, by the way, that podcasting is really what we are going for here with AI. And by the way, I've heard some AI generated podcasts that were worrisome to me as a host. But in any event, what's your view of the labor market implications? Because of those, of course, have political implications.
100%. I mean, I think labor market implications rightly get a lot of attention, and they should get even more attention. Most of us earn our living in the labor market, and if jobs disappear, wages fall, that's going to have sweeping implications for society. And there too, you have crazy wide range of predictions. Some people are predicting that within 10 years, several occupations will have disappeared. Some other people are predicting that this is going to create a jobs bonanza because we're all going to become more productive. So firms are going to create more jobs for workers. So where are we? Well, I think if you look at past historical episodes of new technologies being rolled out, you can find analogs for both of those. For example, with robotics, we've had a lot of jobs from the factory floor disappear, and that created joblessness for certain types of workers. There are not as many welders or assemblers anymore. And there are other technologies, for example, those that were introduced at the beginning of the 20th century in the automobile industry by Henry Ford and then Alfred P. Sloan, that made that technology, that made that sector the fastest growing employer, because there was great need for new workers doing new tasks and a variety of things. So that really puts a very important light on this question. It's really dependent on how we use AI, what type of AI we target, and what type of AI we achieve. So now my numbers, which are under the scenario of business as usual continuing, are already giving you a bit of a clue about that. If only about 5% of jobs are going to get impacted, and some of them are going to be automated, some of them are going to be semi-automated, you're not going to have a complete jobs apocalypse. But 5% of jobs, if they all disappear, that's not a trivial number either. So that would have implications. Some people would lose their jobs. They may then get reallocated to other jobs or not. That will depend on the fluidity of the labor market, retraining opportunities, what else is going on with trade and other technologies. But one thing that also distinguishes AI from robotics is useful to know. Robotics really targeted jobs that were done by a relatively few groups of workers. So it was people, say, who were painters or welders or assemblers on the factory floor. Those tend to be younger and male. Whereas if you look at the jobs that are potentially doable by AI, they're in offices. So they're more equally distributed between men and women, between different demographic groups, younger and older workers. It's a little bit more heavily tilting towards women, but more balanced than what we have seen in the past. What that implies is that some of the inequality implications may be quite different.
That's my next point, which is why, again, I feel AI may be able to replace podcast hosts pretty quickly, because we're unneeded. You did the segue perfectly. I've spent a lot of my time as a public official and as a writer dealing with inequality related issues, and both the inequality within societies and inequality between societies. And it's very clear that AI could have a massive implication for accelerating inequality, because some aspects of AI are expensive and hard to get, and could provide enormous value added. And we've seen this phenomenon over the past 30 years in markets, where people with a lot of computing power can get in, identify anomalies, identify patterns, get out faster. And they've just got a big advantage over everybody else who's dealing in the marketplace. Presumably, AI could do the same thing in a variety of ways, and enable those with the most access to the most powerful AI to have a significant advantage, whether it's in financial markets, emergent crypto markets, other kinds of areas. And the question is, do you worry that even if AI has a fairly modest impact on growth and on jobs, that it could have a larger impact on the speed with which inequality grows?
Yeah, 100%. You put it extremely well. Many transitions create new sources of inequality. Some firms are able to adapt to them, some are not. Some entrepreneurs are at the forefront, some aren't. And in the case of AI, it is very concentrated. So right now, that might change. DeepSeek shows how different things might be possible. But right now, there are a handful of companies that are really at the forefront, and those companies are going to make big money. And that will be true even if AI doesn't completely revolutionarily transform the US economy, because even if it's not as transformative as its boosters claim, people are going to use AI. Companies are going to feel forced to integrate AI into their production process, into their customer service. So I think AI is here to stay. And who the winners are, who the losers are, that's going to depend on market structure. It's going to depend on regulation. It's going to depend on, whether there's financing and appetite for alternative approaches. So there are scenarios in which a few people can make a huge amount of money. There are scenarios in which the labor market inequality implications could be very large, as I claim. But let me add that there are some very good economists who also think that the opposite is possible, that AI could be an equalizing force because people who are performing cognitive tasks are typically better paid than those who perform manual tasks. And some of the early studies show AI may help workers within a task that are performing less well. So it can be like a helper for the mediocre. And if that's the case, there might be some equalizing effects of AI as well. I'm not so optimistic. I think whenever you have a new technology, there will be new ways in which some people benefit from it and some people don't. And the same actually, by the way, applies, as you hinted at, for the comparison between countries. Some countries are going to be able to integrate AI well, and some countries are going to see many of the things they were exporting, including services, now no longer being as profitable or as lucrative, and they're not going to be able to adapt to the changing times. So there are many potentially disruptive changes coming here.
Yeah, I mean, I've sat with I sat with a bunch of senior tech people and some senior African officials, and they said, "Well, we're going to get all those service center jobs that they had in India." And the tech people are like, "No, you're not, because
we're going to get them back
because it's going to be done by a machine." Or I talked to a senior official from a big country in Latin America, and he was like, we think the global South could get left behind because of intensifying competition between places like the US and China, where they try to restrict access to the technology for national security reasons. And that then makes it harder for those countries.
100%. But even if they didn't restrict, again, depending on the direction of AI, it could have those same consequences. Imagine, for example, that we use AI mostly for automation. The type of labor that it will displace are middle skill, lower skill workers often. And those are abundant in places like India, Indonesia, Mexico. So that it would be much harder for these countries to benefit from AI.
Yeah, no question about that. Of course, one of the X factors in all of this is that government officials make the right kind of regulatory decisions and create the right kind of policy environment. And of course, you've just filled a stadium with economists who understand this, but I don't think you could fill a stadium with government officials that understand it.
Well, especially, are you optimistic that the current administration is going to make the right regulatory moves?
Well, no. I mean, the current administration is an interesting case because there is such an infusion of people from the tech sector who have recognized, I think, that they wanted to stay out of the government. But then they recognized that we were entering a period in which we were going to make some big choices about the nature of the public policy environment for AI. And they realized they couldn't be out of that discussion.
That's right.
So they want to come in and say, let's not regulate. Or, and this is a variation on the theme, let's worry about an extinction level event.
Yes. Because
that's interesting. And that'll keep you distracted from regulating my business because I want to dominate the market.
Yes. No, I think that's by the way, that I think was also true under the previous administration. Yes. And in Europe, in the UK AI Summit, for example, last year, all the talk was about AI safety, conceptualized as dealing with extinction level events, which first of all presumes we are heading towards AGI very fast. So it actually gives a boost to the industry. And second, it really doesn't focus on the more mundane but equally troubling things like jobs, misinformation, inequality in the product market, because some firms are adopting AI and some others aren't, and all sorts of issues related to surveillance. So I think that we need a balanced approach. Absolutely, regulating AI to a level or to a standstill would not be the right thing, and I think there is now increasing recognition of that in Europe as well. But getting rid of all guardrails would be terrible as well.
Yeah, particularly since we're not exactly sure where the guardrails are supposed to go. But let me just go back to one last question here about the inequality thing. That as I think about what you were saying, and you're talking about, well, we could have some benefits to lower skilled workers who could, augment their capabilities through AI, and other kinds of benefits to white collar workers. That's describing the bulk of the workforce. And there could be some benefits within the bulk of the workforce. But in some respects, what I worry about more is that over the course of the past 40 years, we've seen sort of a group of people leave the planet that we're all on. They've sort of gone up to the next level of wealth. And so you've got literally dozens of people controlling wealth equivalent to half of human population, or you've got hundreds of people in the US with wealth equivalent to the bottom 50 or 60% of the population. They're operating on a different level. Absolutely. And so this could accelerate the degree by which they separate themselves, even if we've got a little bit of constructive churn down at the worker bee level in society.
100%. That's why I was trying to start by saying the inequality created by a few companies being very successful, especially if those are a few companies owned by a handful of people, that's going to have a mega impact on overall inequality and the inequality of income, for example, driven by what the share of the top 0.1% is in society. That's very different from what's going to happen to labor market income inequality with AI, which I think is also likely to grow, but not a big amount over the next few years or over the next 5 years or so.
Okay, I said it was the last question. This will be the last question. And it seems like maybe it's the caboose or maybe it's the beginning of another train here, but I was just talking to some people today and they were saying, well, AI is going to make a revolution in crypto possible. And we're going to move away from traditional currencies, traditional central banks, and so on and so forth. I don't know, maybe I'm old fashioned, but I'm like, when I hear that, I think Dutch tulip bulb bubble. It's like, what, because people don't really fully understand it. And so the people that do think this might give them an edge and have some money invested in it say, well, let's move into this and we'll make our killing and then we'll get out. And all of a sudden the world is not going to have the kind of fiscal, the monetary policy underpinnings that have kept it relatively stable for a while. And that worries me. Does it worry you?
100%. Look, I could come up with my list of 20 major problems ranging from demographic change, what's going on to democracy, inequality, climate change, pandemics, all crypto or the solution, the things that crypto would be a solution wouldn't be among them. Central banks are not perfect, but we've done quite well in terms of monetary stability and central banks taking action during periods such as the financial crisis. And if you compare, the mistakes or the misdeeds done by central banks, they are trivial relative to scams that can go on with crypto. So I would very much worry about a big boom in crypto. But ideologically, of course, it appeals to people who want no regulation, because crypto then also gives them a way to escape the regulation that comes from using regular currency. So there is an ideological and perhaps economic rationale for coupling crypto and AI, but I don't think it's something that's good for society.
I'm with you. I wish we had many more hours to discuss this, and
we'll do it again. I'll be happy to come back.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So we'll invite you back. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know our listeners enjoyed the conversation as well and found it very valuable. And hopefully we'll continue it again very soon.
Thank you very much, David. I'll be happy to come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Daron. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll be back each and every week with more of Siliconsciousness. Bye-bye.